I raised my tranquilizer gun at the lioness who'd just lost her cubs, watching a baby baboon stumble into her cage, but when she opened her jaws, what happened next made my blood run cold. Then the men with guns arrived at my gate, demanding I hand over the monkey, and I realized the miracle I was protecting might cost me everything. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop your city in the comments. I want to know how far this story reaches, because what happened at the last stop sanctuary that night proves that miracles don't respect borders or logic. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Now, let's get into the story of Sahara. The first cub was already cold when Dr. Elizabeth Vance pulled it free. She worked in the pre-dawn darkness of the surgery bay, her hands slick with birth fluids and desperation. Sahara, the rescued lioness with scars like road maps across her tawny coat, lay sedated on the steel table, her massive sides no longer heaving with contractions. "Come on, baby. Come on," Elizabeth whispered, rubbing the tiny body with heated towels. CPR compressions with 2 fingers. A ventilator mask smaller than a shot glass pressed to the cub's muzzle. Nothing. The second cub was worse. Underdeveloped. Already gone. Elizabeth's vision blurred. 20 years in wildlife rescue, and the losses still carved pieces from her soul. But when she looked up at Sahara's face, at those human-like amber eyes half open despite the sedation, she saw something that made her chest fracture. A mother's sorrow. Sahara knew. Animals always knew. "I'm so sorry," Elizabeth choked out, placing the stillborn cubs on a warming blanket as protocol demanded. "I'm so sorry, Mama." The lioness's eyes closed. A single low moan escaped her throat, a sound older than language, older than grief itself. Elizabeth was documenting the time of death when the radio crackled. "Doc, we got a situation on Highway 93. Rollover accident. Looks like, hell, it looks like a transport van. Cages everywhere." Elizabeth's blood went cold. Illegal wildlife trafficking ran through Nevada like poison veins. Every few months, a bust. Every few months, animals dead or dying on the asphalt. "Survivors?" she asked. "Hard to tell. NHP is on scene but, wait, something just moved in the brush. Static. Then, Doc, you're not gonna believe this. There's a baby monkey heading your direction." Little guy's scared out of his mind. Elizabeth looked at the stillborn cubs. At Sahara, whose maternal hormones were flooding her system with nowhere to go. At the darkened sanctuary beyond the window. "How far out?" she asked quietly. "Maybe 10 minutes. He's following the fence line. Probably smells the water tanks." Elizabeth's hand moved to the tranquilizer rifle mounted on the wall. 10 minutes until a prey animal walked into a predator's den. 10 minutes until the sanctuary's security cameras would capture something impossible. Or something fatal. She checked the monitor. Sahara's heart rate was climbing, waking from sedation, returning to consciousness, returning to loss. Outside, in the Nevada darkness, something small was crying. The motion sensors blinked red. Elizabeth's coffee mug shattered on the concrete floor. On the security monitor, a tiny silhouette squeezed through the drainage culvert, the one she'd been meaning to reinforce for weeks. The infrared camera painted the intruder in ghostly white-green, a baby baboon, no bigger than a football, covered in dust and highway grime. Heading directly into the main lion enclosure. No, Elizabeth was already running, grabbing the tranq rifle, her radio, a catchpole she'd never be fast enough to use. The enclosure was 200 yards from the surgery bay. She had maybe 90 seconds. Through the fence, she could see Sahara. The lioness had dragged herself to the corner of the den, her body curled around the empty space where her cubs should have been. But now her head lifted. Nostrils flaring. Ears swiveling toward the tiny intruder who'd just stumbled into her territory. The baboon, Rue, Elizabeth would later name him, was crying. High-pitched distress calls that should have triggered every predatory instinct in Sahara's 400-pound body. Elizabeth's finger found the trigger guard. If Sahara charged, she'd have one shot to. Sahara stood. The lioness moved with the terrible grace of a hunter, stalking low across the sandy enclosure. Rue froze, his enormous eyes reflecting the security floodlights. Too young to run. Too small to fight. Just a baby, miles from any troop, seeking warmth in the worst possible place. Elizabeth raised the rifle. Sahara, no. Please, no. The lioness's jaws opened. Elizabeth couldn't watch. Couldn't look away. Sahara's massive head lowered, and nudged the baboon. Gently. The way a cat noses a kitten. Checking for injury. Checking for life. Rue toppled backward, then scrambled upright and grabbed onto Sahara's leg, his tiny fingers clutching tawny fur. The baboon buried his face against the lioness's chest, making sounds that could have been words in any language. Help me, hold me, don't leave me alone. And Sahara, grieving, hormonal, her body still producing milk for the cubs she'd never nurse, curled around him. Elizabeth's rifle lowered. Through the fence mesh, she watched something biology textbooks said was impossible. Sahara grooming the baboon with her rough tongue. Rue clinging to her neck, exactly where a lion cub would ride. The lioness's human-like eyes closing with something that looked like peace. A predator adopting her prey. A mother choosing love over instinct. Elizabeth's radio crackled. Doc, you there? Nevada Highway Patrol is asking questions about that crashed van. Apparently, those animals were worth 6 figures on the black market. You seen anything unusual? Elizabeth stared at the monitor. At the impossible bond forming in real time. No, she lied. Nothing unusual. The lie tasted like gasoline. Because somewhere on Highway 93, someone was missing their very expensive cargo. And they'd be coming to collect. Headlights swept across the sanctuary entrance. Elizabeth crouched in the safety corridor, the reinforced observation tunnel that ran behind the enclosures, pressing binoculars against the viewing window. Rue had fallen asleep against Sahara's belly, his tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm with the lioness's breathing. But something glinted at his neck. Elizabeth adjusted the focus. A collar. Leather, embedded in his fur. And beneath the grime, a small rectangular device. A GPS tracker. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't a random escape from a roadside zoo. This was high-end inventory. Tagged. Traced. Owned. The baboon was worth a fortune to someone who didn't care that he was terrified, alone, and clinging to a predator for comfort. Elizabeth pulled out her phone to call Fish and Wildlife. Tires crunched on gravel. Through the front windows, she saw the black SUV. Tinted windows. No plates. It parked directly in front of the main gate with the confidence of people who didn't expect resistance. 3 men stepped out. Not the meth-head poachers she'd dealt with before, the ones who trapped coyotes for fighting rings. These men wore tactical clothing. Cargo pants. Boots that cost more than Elizabeth's monthly salary. One carried a professional capture pole. Another, a veterinary sedation kit. The third carried a gun. Elizabeth's pulse hammered as she met them at the locked gate. Last stop sanctuary is closed, she said, keeping her voice steady. Come back during business hours. The lead man, mid-40s, clean-shaven, dead eyes, smiled without warmth. Dr. Vance, I presume. We're here about our property. A juvenile olive baboon. GPS tracker shows he's on your property. I haven't seen any baboons, Elizabeth lied. No. The man pulled out a tablet, showing a pulsing red dot. Our asset is broadcasting from that enclosure. Right there. He pointed directly at Sahara's den. Elizabeth's mind raced. If they saw Rue with Sahara, they'd sedate them both. Separate them. The shock alone could kill the baboon. And Sahara, already traumatized, already grieving. That enclosure houses a rescue lioness, Elizabeth said. African lion. Very aggressive. If your baboon wandered in there, he's already. Then we'll need to retrieve the body for inventory purposes. The man's smile sharpened. Open the gate, doctor. Or we'll open it ourselves. You have no legal authority. Neither do you. His voice dropped to a purr. Harboring illegally trafficked wildlife is a federal crime. We could report you. Have this whole sanctuary shut down, every animal seized. Or, he gestured to his partners, we take what's ours and leave you alone. Elizabeth's hand moved to her radio. The nearest sheriff's deputy was 20 minutes out. By then. Behind her, from the enclosure, Sahara roared. Not in aggression. In warning. The lioness had sensed the threat. She'd moved Rue deeper into the den, positioning her body between the infant and the strange voices. The man's eyes narrowed. That lion just protected something. It's alive in there, isn't it? Elizabeth's blood turned to ice. Last chance, doctor. Open the gate. His partner raised the tranquilizer rifle. Aimed at the enclosure. At Sahara. At Rue. The dart gun hissed. The tranquilizer dart struck the enclosure wall, embedding in concrete 6 inches from Sahara's head. Elizabeth didn't think. She slammed her palm against the red emergency button mounted by the gate. Protocol red. Sirens wailed. Every enclosure door in the sanctuary locked simultaneously, reinforced steel deadbolts sliding into place with mechanical precision. The main gate's magnetic locks engaged with a sound like a prison slamming shut. Floodlights blazed to life, then died just as quickly as the backup generator kicked in, plunging non-essential areas into darkness. The traffickers froze, caught in the sudden chaos. What the hell did you just do? The lead man snarled. Initiated emergency lockdown protocol, Elizabeth said, her voice steadier than her hands. Required by state law when there's a security breach. You just fired a weapon on federal wildlife refuge property. Sheriff's Department has been automatically notified. ETA 12 minutes. It was a lie. The sheriff's notification system had been broken for 3 weeks. Budget cuts. But they didn't know that. The wind picked up, desert wind that tasted like copper and sand. Elizabeth glanced at the horizon. A wall of dust was rolling in from the northeast, turning the golden sunset into something apocalyptic. The sky bled orange and rust red. You're making a mistake, doctor, the man said softly. That baboon is worth $40,000. We're not leaving without him. Then you're not leaving. His smile vanished. He nodded to his partners. They spread out along the fence line, testing for weaknesses, looking for entry points Elizabeth knew they'd eventually find. The sanctuary was 30 years old. Chain link and prayers. Inside the enclosure, Sahara paced. The lioness's human-like eyes tracked the strangers with predatory focus. She'd seen men like this before, in the circus that had scarred her, in the roadside zoo that had starved her. Men who took what they wanted. Elizabeth watched as Sahara picked up Rue by the scruff, the way a mother cat carries a kitten, and retreated to the back of the den. The concrete shelter where Elizabeth stored enrichment toys and medical supplies. Sahara deposited the baboon in the darkest corner, then positioned herself at the entrance. Guarding him. Rue's tiny fingers clutched at Sahara's leg, his eyes wide with confusion. Don't leave me, those eyes seemed to say. Please don't leave me alone. Sahara rumbled, a sound halfway between a purr and a growl. A mother's promise. The sandstorm hit. Visibility dropped to 20 feet. Dust choked the floodlights, turning them into useless orange smudges. The animals, the wolves, the bears, the remaining big cats, began howling, roaring, sensing the wrongness in the air. Elizabeth's radio crackled with static and died. Her phone had no signal. Through the swirling dust, she saw flashlight beams. The traffickers were moving toward the service entrance, the one with the rusted lock she'd been meaning to replace. The one that wouldn't hold. Metal screeched as something broke. Elizabeth pressed her back against the concrete wall of the observation corridor, surrounded by darkness and the howl of desert wind. Her flashlight had died 20 minutes ago. The backup generator powered only critical systems, life support, water pumps, the medical refrigerators. Everything else was shadow and sand. She could hear them outside. Footsteps. Voices muffled by the storm. The metallic scrape of tools against chain link as they systematically worked their way around the perimeter. It was only a matter of time. Elizabeth closed her eyes, remembering why she'd built this place. 20 years ago, fresh out of veterinary school, drowning in debt and idealism. She'd seen a tiger in a roadside cage in Arizona, ribs showing, water bowl filled with algae, dead eyes that had given up on everything. She'd stolen him. Literally hotwired the owner's truck, loaded the tiger, and driven 3 states before her conscience caught up with her stupidity. Turned herself in. Paid the fine. Lost her first clinic job. But the tiger, Raja, had lived another 12 years in a proper sanctuary. She'd visited him every month until he died in his sleep under an oak tree, full-bellied and content. Some things are worth the consequences, she thought. Elizabeth crawled to the viewing window overlooking Sahara's enclosure. Pressed her face against the reinforced glass. The lioness lay in the den entrance, backlit by the faint emergency lighting. Rue was curled against her chest, one tiny hand clutching her ear, fast asleep despite the chaos. Sahara's massive paw rested over him, protective, gentle, impossibly tender. "Hey, Mama," Elizabeth whispered. Sahara's ears swiveled. Those human-like amber eyes found Elizabeth in the darkness, and the lioness blinked. Once. Slowly. The universal sign of trust among felines. "I see you. I trust you. We're pack." Tears burned Elizabeth's throat. "I'm going to keep him safe," she promised. "Both of you. I don't know how, but I swear." Sahara huffed, a sound like acknowledgement, like faith. The lioness lowered her head, resting her chin on Rue's sleeping form. The baby baboon sighed, burrowing deeper into her fur. Predator and prey. Mother and child. A bond that shouldn't exist, written in hormones and grief and desperate, beautiful need. For one moment, the sanctuary was silent except for breathing. 3 souls, human, lion, baboon, connected by something older than fear. Then glass shattered. The service door had been breached. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, sweeping across the corridor. Voices echoed, cold and professional. "Split up. Check every enclosure. It's in here somewhere." Elizabeth's hand found the tranquilizer rifle she'd propped against the wall. Inside the den, Sahara's eyes opened. She'd heard them too. The lioness rose to her feet, positioning herself between Rue and the approaching footsteps. Her lips pulled back from 3-inch canines. A low growl built in her chest, a sound that made Elizabeth's bones vibrate. "You'll have to go through me." A flashlight beam found the enclosure. Then found Sahara. The man behind the light froze. "Jesus Christ, that's a big cat." His partner raised the tranq rifle. Target acquired. The dart gun hissed. The dart flew wide, slamming into the concrete wall behind Sahara with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. The lioness exploded. Her roar wasn't just sound, it was a physical force that rattled the chain link, set off car alarms in the parking lot, and made every living thing within a quarter-mile understand what true apex predation sounded like. Elizabeth clapped her hands over her ears, but the vibration traveled through the concrete floor, up her spine, into her chest cavity where it rattled her ribs. The 2 traffickers stumbled backward. One dropped his flashlight. "Reload! Reload!" the first man shouted, fumbling with the tranquilizer gun. But Sahara wasn't charging. She stood her ground at the den entrance, every muscle coiled, hackles raised in a mane that made her look twice her size. Behind her, deep in the shadows, Rue's terrified crying could barely be heard over the wind. The lioness's human-like eyes blazed with maternal fury. "You will not take my baby." "Screw this," the second man snarled. He dropped the capture pole and pulled a pistol from his hip. "We'll take the asset after she's down. Permanently." "Wait," his partner started. "She's just an animal." The gun rose. Elizabeth moved without thinking. She burst from the observation corridor, her tranquilizer rifle up, shouting, "Federal Wildlife Officer. Drop your weapons." It was a lie, she was just a veterinarian with a permit, but her voice carried the authority of someone with nothing left to lose. The traffickers spun toward her. 3 seconds of confusion. 3 seconds where nobody knew who was aiming at whom in the dust-choked darkness. Then the lead trafficker, the cold-eyed man from the gate, stepped into the compound. He'd circled around through the cut fence. His weapon was already drawn. "Dr. Vance," he said calmly, "you're making this very difficult." Elizabeth kept her rifle trained on the men near Sahara's enclosure. Her finger rested on the trigger. Enough sedative to drop a grizzly bear. Not lethal. But at this range, aimed at a human. "Walk away," Elizabeth said. Right now. Before this becomes a crime scene. The man's smile was reptilian. It already is. You're harboring stolen property. Threatening federal contractors. You think some backwater sheriff is going to side with you? I think you're about to find out. Behind them all, Sahara paced along the fence line, tracking movements, calculating distances. The lioness's gaze moved from Elizabeth to the armed men to Rue's hiding place. Protecting her pack. The standoff stretched. 5 people. 3 guns. 1 lioness. 1 terrified baby who didn't understand that the world could be this cruel. Wind screamed through the compound. Sand obscured everything beyond 10 feet. The perfect cover for violence. The lead trafficker's radio crackled. A voice, distorted by static, "Boss, we got company." Headlights on the access road. Multiple vehicles. Might be. The transmission cut off. But Elizabeth had heard enough. Back up. The man's eyes narrowed. He'd heard it too. Change of plans, he said coldly. He aimed his pistol at the enclosure lock. We take the asset now. He fired. The lock exploded. Sahara's gate swung open. The open gate yawned like a mouth. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Sahara stood frozen at the threshold of her enclosure, hackles raised, eyes calculating. Free. Truly free for the first time since the circus. And between her and the men with guns stood Elizabeth. Don't, Elizabeth said, though she didn't know if she was talking to Sahara or the traffickers. Her hand dropped the tranquilizer rifle and found a flashbang canister on her belt, standard animal control equipment for startling charging predators. Everyone just. The lead trafficker lunged. His hand clamped around Elizabeth's wrist, twisting the flashbang from her grip. You had your chance, Doctor. Pain lanced up Elizabeth's arm. She cried out, stumbling to her knees on the concrete. And Sahara exploded. The lioness didn't think. Didn't calculate. She charged with 400 pounds of maternal fury behind her, covering the 30 feet between the den and Elizabeth in 3 massive bounds. The already damaged gate, weakened by the gunshot, by rust, by 20 years of desert weather, shrieked as Sahara hit it at full speed. Metal tore. The entire gate section ripped free from its hinges. Sahara burst into the compound. The traffickers scattered like startled prey. The man holding Elizabeth released her instantly, backpedaling so fast he tripped over his own equipment. His pistol clattered across the concrete. But Sahara didn't chase them. She positioned herself over Elizabeth, standing guard, her massive body a living shield. The lioness's head swiveled, tracking each threat, lips pulled back from teeth that could crush bone. A warning growl rumbled from her chest like thunder. Touch her again and die. Elizabeth looked up into those human-like amber eyes. Saw recognition. Saw choice. Sahara could have run, could have disappeared into the desert night, taken her freedom. Instead, she'd chosen to protect. Pack. FBI. Hands up. Hands up now. Floodlights blazed to life. The cavalry had arrived, not sheriff's deputies but federal agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn, surrounding the compound. The traffickers froze, hands raising. Through the chaos, Elizabeth heard the lead agent shouting, "That's her. That's Dr. Vance. Veterinary consultant called in a tip 3 hours ago about suspicious transport vehicles." Elizabeth's mind reeled. She hadn't called anyone. Unless. Her intern. Marcus. The kid she'd sent home before sunset. He must have seen the SUV, put the pieces together, called it in. Bless him. The traffickers were on the ground now, being cuffed. Their weapons confiscated. Their GPS tracker pinging uselessly from Rue's collar in the den. But Sahara remained tense, protective, ready to fight. "Hey, Mama," Elizabeth whispered, slowly reaching into her pocket. She pulled out the emergency rations she always carried, dried meat treats. "It's okay now. You did so good. So good." She tossed a piece toward the enclosure. Sahara's ears swiveled. Her stance softened slightly. Elizabeth tossed another piece. Then another. creating a trail back to the den where Rue's crying had finally stopped, where the baby baboon was peeking out, watching his protector with wide, trusting eyes. Sahara looked at Elizabeth. Then at Rue. Then back at Elizabeth. Trust. The lioness turned and walked back into her enclosure, following the food trail, her tail held high. When she reached the den, she picked up Rue gently and disappeared into the shadows. Elizabeth sagged against the concrete, shaking. An agent approached, helping her to her feet. "Ma'am, are you?" The medical alarm from the surgery bay started screaming. Sahara's post-surgical vitals. Something was wrong. The medical alarm was a false positive, Sahara's heart rate spiking from stress, not injury. By dawn, the compound looked like a crime scene from a movie. Yellow tape. Evidence markers. The trafficker's black SUV impounded on a flatbed truck, its front end crumpled from where they'd crashed into a drainage ditch fleeing the FBI. Elizabeth sat on the surgery bay steps, drinking cold coffee and watching the sun rise over the Nevada desert. Her wrist was bandaged. Her ribs ached from where she'd hit the concrete. But she was alive. Inside the enclosure, Sahara lay curled around Rue, both of them finally sleeping. The baby baboon's tiny fingers still clutched her fur. The lioness's breathing was deep and steady, her human-like eyes closed in something that looked like peace. The photo Elizabeth had taken on her phone, Sahara's stoic profile, Rue clinging to her neck, golden hour light painting them both, had already gone viral. Her intern Marcus had posted it to the sanctuary's social media with the caption, "When grief becomes love." 40,000 shares in 6 hours. But the piece shattered at 9 a.m. when Drive Raymond Chin arrived. The primate specialist was 60, silver-haired, with kind eyes that had seen too many impossible situations. He'd driven from the San Diego Zoo at Elizabeth's request, and he didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Show me the baboon," he said. They stood at the observation window. Rue was awake now, playing with Sahara's tail while the lioness watched with maternal patience. The baby made soft cooing sounds. Sahara rumbled back, a conversation in 2 languages that somehow made perfect sense. Dr. Chen was silent for 3 full minutes. Then, "Elizabeth, you know this can't last." Her chest tightened. "He's thriving. Look at him." Sahara's hormones are giving her a temporary maternal window. But Rue is a baboon. Olive baboon, specifically. Highly social primates. In 6 months, he'll need troop dynamics, primate communication, teaching from his own species. Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but unyielding. If he stays with her, he'll behaviorally imprint on lions. He'll never integrate with other baboons. And Sahara's maternal hormones will fade. In 8, maybe 10 months, her predatory instincts will reassert. One playful bite from a 400-pound lion, Elizabeth. 1. Elizabeth's hands clenched on the window ledge. So the photo captures a miracle. A real, genuine miracle. Dr. Chen placed a hand on her shoulder. But miracles aren't meant to be forever. They're meant to save us when we need them most. Inside the enclosure, Rue looked up at the observation window. His enormous eyes, human-like in their expression, seemed to ask a question only Elizabeth could hear. "You're going to take me away, aren't you?" Sahara sensed it too. The lioness lifted her head, amber eyes finding Elizabeth through the glass. A mother's sorrow. The radio crackled, "Doc, we have a situation at the north fence. Something big just breached the perimeter." The transport crate was lined with soft blankets and smelled like bananas. Dr. Chen had brought it himself, a proper primate carrier with ventilation holes shaped like stars. Elizabeth knelt beside Sahara's enclosure, her voice breaking. "You saved him, Mama. You gave him everything he needed when he needed it most. But now he needs his own kind." Sahara lay with Rue pressed against her chest, grooming his fur one last time. Those human-like amber eyes looked at Elizabeth with something that transcended species, understanding wrapped in heartbreak. A mother's sorrow. Again. The separation took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Elizabeth used food rewards, soft commands, 20 years of experience coaxing traumatized animals to trust. Rue cried, high-pitched distress calls that made Sahara pace and growl. But Elizabeth was gentle, quick, merciful. The baby baboon was in the crate. Dr. Chen secured the door. And Sahara roared. Not in fury. In loss. For 3 days, the lioness barely ate. She carried her enrichment toys to the corner where Rue had slept, arranging them like ghost cubs. Elizabeth sat outside the enclosure every night, whispering promises through the fence. On the 4th day, Elizabeth opened the gate that connected to the adjacent enclosure. A male rescue lion named Atlas, golden, scarred, gentle despite his size, padded through cautiously. Sahara growled. Then sniffed. Then, slowly, touched her nose to his. 2 souls who'd survived the worst humanity could offer. Finding each other. 6 months later, Elizabeth received a video from Dr. Chen. Rue, now twice his original size, playing with a troop of rescued baboons. Laughing, yes, baboons laughed, while wrestling with juveniles his age. Thriving. That night, Elizabeth stood at Sahara's enclosure. The lioness lay beside Atlas, their bodies intertwined, both at peace. And on Elizabeth's phone, the viral photo, Sahara's stoic profile, Rue clinging to her neck, bathed in golden light. It wasn't a forever family. But for one impossible night, it had been everything. We rescue them to give them the best life, Elizabeth thought. Not the life we want them to have. Sometimes, saving someone means loving them enough to let them go. If you believe that love can transcend instinct, that grief can transform into hope, and that the wildest hearts sometimes hold the gentlest souls, then like and share this story with someone who needs to remember that miracles still happen. Subscribe now for more true rescue stories that prove compassion is the most powerful force in nature. And check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now, specially crafted for you.